I'm happy and excited to be here. I've taught one of these other weekly tutorials, but it's nice to be here and to be able to talk with all of you. So today we're going to talk about a subject that is near and dear to my heart, and that's involving youth with oral history and just with any of your stories projects. We're going to talk about some creative ways to make that happen, and some things and some tools and tips that you can do to work with youth, have them do oral history, not only for maybe have them interview people, but we also will talk about how to interview them and kind of the power that can come from doing that too. So I am going to go ahead. Let's see, it looks like I've got a chat here. Okay, looks like we've got Kate on. So, and you only made it, yeah, because I remember you were here last time, right? So good, that works. Glad to have you here. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen because I have a PowerPoint here to kind of keep us on track. So I'll do that. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the chat, or we may have some time at the end for a couple of questions too, just kind of depending on how much I gab here once we get started. So we'll go ahead and start sharing. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Yes, okay. All right, I'm going to change to slideshow mode here. Okay, so I think any of us who worked with youth know that they add just a little bit of zing and color to any project that we do. If we prepare and also use patience with with anything that we want to do, because sometimes if we're being really honest, they're kind of light years ahead of us when it comes to technology and different things. And so sometimes we have to be patient with them as they're speeding ahead, and they have to be patient with us while we're catching up. So it's a little bit of a balance, but when we decide to involve youth, it makes a huge difference, I found. So I just a couple of reasons why it's a good idea to kind of bring youth into maybe some of your oral history projects, or even your writing projects or video projects. A lot of times when we feel a little intimidated to do video projects, youth have no intimidation with that. They are learning in school how to use different video programs, and they're really good at it. And so I have wrangled my kids in on many occasions to help with video projects that I feel a little intimidated by. And it's been a great result when I've done that. So oftentimes they will think of questions that you won't in an oral history project. They kind of think of things that maybe that isn't always at the top of your mind. And I find when I back off and let the kids ask the questions, I'm really pleasantly surprised at what they come up with. Also, as I had mentioned before, they're a whiz at technology. They're kind of born knowing how to use technology. And then the other thing, as I mentioned at the first, is it's really wise to ask them questions and record their stories. Capturing a child's voice or even a teenager's voice is super cool, because they grow up and they change, and their thoughts change and their ideals change. And to capture who they were when they were young is something that's truly special, and something that they will cherish and their kids will cherish down the road if you capture that. So, and then another thing I wanted to talk about a little bit, and I'm not sure if Rhonda has touched on this in the weekly tutorials or not, but one thing that I learned several years ago is that kids who know their family stories, they know their own, like how they came to be, their birth story and things, stories of when they were super little or different things, they are confident. There was a study done at Emory University that they were trying to find out what helps kids to be confident. And the biggest indicator was that children who knew their family narrative and their family stories were more confident, They were more resilient and able to handle difficult situations in their life. And so one thing I like to start with, oops, we went backwards somehow. Um, well, actually, another thing also is sometimes, we think of working with kids, like kids under 12. But one thing I've also found is working with junior high and high school kids is also very rewarding. They have a lot to contribute, they're wise, and some of them are able to maybe talk about some things that they hold inside when you give them an opportunity for a one-on-one interview or an opportunity to write about some of their feelings. And that's rewarding for both the listener and the giver. And so don't shy away from teens. They can be pretty miraculous in the process of recording oral history or writing stories. And like I said, videos. So when I'm talking about youth, I'm not talking about just little kids. I'm also talking about teenagers and all they have to offer. So going back to that Emory University study, they actually had a series of 20 questions that they asked the kids. And they found that when the kids knew about half or a little over half, that as they studied these kids over a period of time, when they knew those answers, then that was the indicator that they were strong and resilient and able to handle tough situations in their life. And so a lot of times I play this game, and I do this with clients just that I interview for their own life story, but I really do this a lot when I'm working with youth. And I actually just worked with some girls at a camp this week where I taught them, and we went through these, and it was really fun to talk about these questions. So here are just a few of the questions that I like to use to kind of get them thinking if they are the subject being interviewed. Do you know where your grandparents grew up? Do you know where your mom and dad went to high school? Do you know where your parents met? Do you know an illness or something really terrible that's happened in your family? And one that they all really love to talk about is, do you know the story of your birth? These are great questions to get them thinking and to get them doing a little detective work, because they don't always know all those answers. And so if you give them a heads up and say, hey, we're going to do an interview, you need to find the answers to these questions, then they feel extra involved in the process too. And it's only going to help them in their lives, right? So the fourth question, I think, is kind of the kicker question that we really need to make sure when we're working with youth that they can answer this question. An illness or something terrible or difficult is a word that I often use that has happened in your family. Because if kids know the answer to that, then they're going to know that they can get through hard things too. If they know that someone in their family overcame something difficult, then they are able to move forward and overcome that as well. Another thing to think about as parents and grandparents, if we get our kids working on a question like that and have them record it, either write it or do an oral history recording, when they're applying to go to college, and for scholarships, chances are they're going to be asked a question similar to this. And so if they're already thinking about it when they're younger, they're going to be prepared to be able to excel at that too. So there's absolutely no cons to playing this what do you know game with youth and getting them going on that. So I want you to kind of think, so we talk about oral history, and when we talk about that, oftentimes we think, well, I'm going to get out my digital recorder and I'm just going to ask them questions and record. And it works both ways. If youth are interviewing grandparents or parents, or if we as the parents and grandparents are interviewing the youth, sometimes we think, well, this is just what we can do. But actually, I want to offer a few other ideas that you can do. Pull out your recorder and chat as you work on these different projects. So one of them is to make a family tree. Sit down with your kids and talk to them about literally where they came from. It can be a digital family tree, or it can be a 3D, an actual tree, which is something that we have in our home. We have a couple of 3D family trees that we created with our kids, and you can get them talking about their family stories that way. Another cool thing is to introduce them to any kind of a stories app. One that I really like to use with my kids is the Memories app through Family Search. It's not the Family Tree app. It's actually called Memories. If you search it in your app store, it's free. And there's a lot of really cool functionality to that app where if they decide, you can record. And when you say you want to record, it pops up with like 10 or 12 questions that it automatically asks. And so it's a great way for kids to be able to interview adults because those questions are already there. And then when you hit the button, they can answer the question for 5 minutes. And then you can go and you can do another one. For us, it's a great, Sunday afternoon activity to record our kids because, sometimes their attention spans are super long and 5 minutes works out pretty well. Another thing that you can do, you can record and pull out your recorder, is to visit a cemetery where you have family. You can kind of go there and share some stories. Sometimes you just have to change the location to get them thinking and get their minds working. Another thing to do is to take a family vacation to a place that maybe is special in your family, where you can talk and remember and share. My husband and I like to take our kids to where we went on our honeymoon and kind of talk about places that we went. And you can pull out your recorder and have a really cool experience and take tons of photos when you're doing this, because sometimes after you take the photos, you can come home and on the Memories app, you can upload those photos and record the story that goes with the photos. So if you don't feel comfortable just recording everything with your recorder or with your phone, take photos, and then it gives you an opportunity to open up that conversation again. Another thing to do, and I like to record us doing this from time to time, is making a family recipe or just cooking together in the kitchen. Dialogue often starts with your children while you're cooking. And if you make a family recipe together, you can talk about the story of that recipe. And that's something great to do. Just journaling together. We talk about oral history, but also written history. Set aside time to journal together. Playing a game. We had an interesting experience a couple years ago. We got a game, and it was a game where the kids asked the parents, it gave cards, and the kids asked the parents questions, and then they had to they raced to see who knew the question. Well, my little 7-year-old at the time didn't know as much as she thought she should. And so during that next week, she would sit down with me and ask me very pointed, detailed questions. And I thought, this is so cool. She wants to know about my life. This is awesome. And then we went to play the game the next week, and she rubbed her hands together and she was like, I've been doing my homework, because she wanted to win that game. So she learned a lot about mom and dad that week, but she also won the game as well. So that was like a double win for her. And then make a video together. With my teenage son, and now my son, he's 22 now, but that was always a great way for us to tell stories, is to sit down and just make a video. Adobe Spark has a free program. iMovie, if you are a Mac person, those are great programs to use to get the kids working on telling stories. And then just the basics of just interviewing your kids and have them interviewing you is just great and a wonderful experience. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute too. So one thing I would suggest is to talk about it with your kids. If you're going to do like an oral history session with your kids and have them, one thing that we've done, my parents have been reticent to be interviewed by me or to have oral history interviews. But if my kids bring it up with them, they are 100% in. And so grandparents don't say no to their grandchildren very often. And so if you work through your kids, you're going to be able to get a great oral history. And so, but preparation is important. You don't want to just send them rogue. You can talk about it a little bit ahead of time and then just tell them. And what I've done with my own kids is just say, have 3 questions in mind that you want to ask Grammy and Grandpa before you go. And then, so they kind of have something in mind. And I say, if you want to write them down. And then also let them talk to their grandparents and set it up, or their aunt and uncle, like whoever or even, someone in your neighborhood. Because your neighbors aren't going to say no to little kids either, chances are. So if you have an idea of someone you want to record their oral history, you work through your kids, it's going to get done. And so let them set it up. Let them set up the time and the place and all of those things. And if you're feeling that nudge to do an interview and people are hesitant, like I say, use your kids. Or, use youth, because then it will actually happen. So another thing that you can do is, I would suggest doing is interview your kids. Pick a way that it will be casual. One thing I suggested before is to cook with them. Let them make a video out of it. Say, hey, let's do an interview, but let's make a video out of it.
After physical therapy, before the haircut.
I think someone's.
What about it?
I think someone's microphone's turned on out there. Not sure who, though. I can't tell.
Well,
let me look here and see.
His plans fell apart, and he could come over now.
Sorry, guys.
So,
someone's microphone's turned on, but I can't tell. Maybe it's this person.
What time is your physical therapy?
See if we can mute this here. Okay, there we go. I think we got it figured out. Okay, so another thing to do, one thing that my sons have done is they started doing a podcast where they interview different people and each other and their grandparents. And that has also been a really cool thing for them because it feels kind of professional. And I have a teenage son that's doing it, and then his brothers are in their early 20s. And that's been a fun thing. Another thing that I just want to remind you is when you do this, and with any oral history interview or any video or anything, save it quickly. Save it to the cloud, save it to whatever like family history program you like to use, so that you don't forget about it and then it just goes away. So make sure that you're saving it quickly when you do that as well. Oh, gosh. Oh, okay. I don't know why we're skipping around here today, but I just kind of want to end by just making the suggestion that, like I said, like I had mentioned, children really can reach that older generation better than anyone. Oftentimes we discount their talents and abilities. But if we bring them into our projects, we won't be disappointed. So I was talking about how, I had my kids interview my parents, and this is my dad during an interview time that my kids did with him. And it was really interesting because they asked questions that I never would have thought to ask. Like my little daughter said, tell me what a day in your life was like when you were 9 years old. She was 9 years old and she wanted to know what a day, oh gosh, my thing just is really touchy. So I apologize about that. And so they were really able to get a good, let me skip back down. I apologize about that. A good interview because they asked some things, and here I am, this professional interviewer, and a part of me feels like I want to step in and help out. But at the end of the day, they didn't need my help. And they were able to do some pretty amazing things just because I gave them the reins and let them do it. And so I think if you are able to do that, the end result is going to be something really terrific.